Hello, Dr. Andrea Slominski here. Going to read a paper that was first delivered at the Mythologium Fates and Graces Conference, August 2nd, 2020. It's titled Social Distancing and Our Return to Hestia, Our Collective Heroine's Journey to the Underworld to Heal, Liberate, and Reclaim the Archetypal Feminine. On March 19th, 2020, Governor Newsom ordered a stay-at-home order for all of California. By April 6th, 42 states had announced mandatory stay-at-home orders. More than 90% of the U.S. population was under shelter-in-place directives during the first COVID-19 shutdown. Everyone was told to go home and shelter in place. We are all in this together, and alone together are two of the phrases and memes that took over all forms of media in March. In the past 4 months, COVID-19 has accomplished what spiritual leaders and religions have been trying to do for millennia. It has, with merciless efficiency, demonstrated that we are all connected and just how dependent we are on each other for survival. The virus erased community, state, and national boundaries in the blink of an eye. Hierarchies and social structures were also turned upside down. Suddenly, grocery clerks, truck drivers, UPS drivers, FedEx drivers, postal workers, takeout chefs, Postmate drivers, and Instacart shoppers were essential workers. Since the pandemic began, 38.6 million Americans have applied for unemployment, and 5.4 million of us have lost our health insurance. Safer at home, shelter at home, and stay home were the messages we received hourly as governments and healthcare workers desperately tried to flatten the curve of the spreading pandemic. Since that initial stay-at-home order, states have reopened too soon, cities have reopened too soon, the virus is roaring back until here we are, possibly on the verge of another shutdown, depending on which experts you listen to. The accusations surrounding who's responsible for this, the lack of planning and incompetence, fill the digiverse. Though the answers and strategies for getting control of the pandemic are vital to all of our lives, these are not the focus of my paper today. I want to take a look at going home, being forced to go home and stay there. The shuttering of businesses, social distancing guidelines, and stay-at-home mandates forced us all to go home. We have been pushed back to home and hearth, the ancient mythological foundation of Greek culture and the realm of Hestia. Looking at this return to home from a mythological perspective allows us to look at the big picture, to look at the universal experiences of being human in this extraordinary time. Through the lens of mythology, we can look beyond our constant fear and anxiety and uncertainty to see the universal experiences of being human. Myths let us know that we are not alone, that the events we experience in our lives are often repeating human patterns. They give us insight into our nature. In the mythology of ancient Greece, the goddess of the home, the hearth, and of the larder, the center of family life, culture, and the center of the earth itself is Hestia. Hestia is the hearth and the fire in it. She is the spirit of home, where a family gathers and finds its center. As a goddess, Hestia never married or had children. She never left the home. She is the energy of home that we relish in family reunions, if we cherish our family of origin. She's the energy that we relish in meals shared around the table, with families of origin or with our chosen families. She is the warmth within holiday gatherings. The name Hestia also signified the center of the earth, which the Greeks believed contained the earth's fire and center. To neglect the energies of Hestia is to ignore the heart and center of life. And now, we've all been directed to return together to the realm of Hestia. Hestia's energies spring from the archetypal feminine. Images of the archetypal feminine emerge from the unknown depths of the unconscious as the Great Mother, the circle, the moon, the universe, the cave, the womb, the darkness, just to list a few. The archetypal feminine manifests through the connection of consciousness with and through these symbols and images. We embody it by experiencing the receptive and nurturing qualities of the earth, the dynamics of codependent origination and interdependence, relationship, intuition, creativity, nurturance, compassion, the cycles of the natural world, and the immanence of divinity. The world has been driven back to the realm of Hestia at a time when we lack relationship and compassion, when cultural, religious, and economic and socioeconomic differences have divided us into ever smaller, competing factions. We've been driven back to Hestia at a time when we are destroying the very ecosystems on the planet that sustains our lives. The archetypal masculine in the world of logos includes rationalism, logic, and by extension, science and commerce. Logos images humanity as transcendent and claims mastery and control over the natural world. Yet, it has been stopped in its tracks by an invisible virus. Science, rationalism, and commerce have been refocused on defeating this one invisible thing. At home, in a retreat from a deadly pandemic, we are face to face with our own mortality. We're sheltering in close quarters for extended periods of time, straining our relationships. We are fearful of the threat to our lives and the lives of those we love, and we're confronted daily with our faults, our frailties, and our complexes. Fear, denial, and a lack of leadership and uncertainty are tearing at the fabric of our society, from the foundations of our economic system to the beleaguered healthcare system. This pandemic is an alchemist's fire that will, in due time, show us who we really are. The forces that have brought us home are forcing us into the mythic underworld of our worst nightmares. Reminiscent of Dante's circles of hell, the images of hospitals from around the world show the gravely ill kept alive by machines and the dead stacking up in refrigerated trucks and ice rinks. Morgues are full, and we cannot bury the dead, nor gather to mourn them. Scientists, researchers, doctors, and essential workers on the front lines have been heroically working. They're keeping what's left of the economy running, helping the sick, researching, questing after a cure, and hoping for a vaccine. While the majority of America stayed safer at home, these essential workers embarked on the hero's journey. They answered the call to adventure and sacrifice. Leaving their castles and citadels of medicine, they go out into the world to fight the dragon, to find the golden fleece, and to bring back the boon to the world. In the lives of these frontline workers, we can see Campbell's classic stages in their individual journeys. Taking up the fight against the virus, the hero ventures forth and comes to the threshold of adventure. Crossing this threshold, the hero descends into the other world or the underworld in the quest for their boon. As we know, each hero's battle, descent, adventure, helpers, challenges, and ultimate triumph and return are unique to each of them in their circumstances. Physicians, scientists, researchers who have taken up the call to suppress, treat, and cure COVID-19 are in the underworld of ICUs, ventilators, indiscriminate death, and a rapidly resurgent pandemic. They're out there fighting in the world. As for the rest of us, safer at home, I offer that we are on a collective heroine's journey, and our boon is no less important: the reclamation and restoration of the conscious feminine. In the first few days and weeks of the lockdown, we saw people busying themselves with all manner of distractions, from baking bread to doing puzzles. Soon, however, it became apparent to many that a divestiture was occurring. Like Inanna, many were stripped of the magic talismans that kept their former lives afloat. As we fell deeper and deeper into the underworld, millions lost their jobs, their income, and the identities that were attached to them. Children lost school and the daily connection with their teachers and their peers. College students were forced home after their first taste of independence, and we lost the social interaction of work. Many essential workers, often earning a low wage, were forced to continue working, putting themselves, their families, and communities at high risk for illness and death. The new demands of homeschooling, social distancing, cooking and cleaning for stressed out, imbalanced households stripped any remaining normalcy from our lives. Spending 24/7 alone for weeks and weeks, or spending 24/7 with those whom you usually saw only 4 to 6 hours a day, finally dealt the death blow to our normalcy, and our former lives were hung on Ereshkigal's hook. The stress of those isolating alone has highlighted our lack of cultural compassion and connection, as well as our inadequate safety net for the elderly, disabled, and the lonely. For those isolating with a group or family, this time has brought out the worst in many of us. Our complexes and projections wrestle daily with those projected upon us. Our faults, frailties, fears, and exhaustion from living under mortal danger for so long literally have exhausted our brains and our psyches. We've been forced into unrelenting, immediate relationship with ourselves, our needs, and the needs of others. The plethora of time now available to us meat-hooked our too busy lives, revealing to some the immediate need for a paradigm shift, and to others further reinforcing the current concretized paradigm of us and them partisan politics, alternative facts, and magical thinking. 2 months after the lockdowns began, George Floyd was murdered by police in Minneapolis. Like Dante, we again went levels deeper in the underworld, prompted to look at our history and our shame. His death sparked a conflagration that was fueled by hundreds of years of slavery, brutality, and murder, and the oppression of Black, Indigenous, and people of color in the U.S. People of all races and ages filled the streets, risking exposure to COVID-19, protesting systemic racism, social and environmental injustice, and social, educational, and economic inequality in American life. The perfect storm of COVID-19, social unrest, and protest highlighted our national legacy of racism and inequality. It was all painfully reflected in the lives of Black bus drivers and low-wage essential workers who had to go to work in Los Angeles, Detroit, New York City, and Miami to feed their families, and who died from the coronavirus. A larger percentage of COVID infections and deaths occur in the BIPOC communities. These protests further revealed how dangerously out of balance our patriarchal, logos-oriented, capitalist system has become. How do we rationalize more tax deductions for businessmen's lunches, more money for the Pentagon, and no extended unemployment for the 36.8 million unemployed American people? The mythos that connects us to each other and the natural world has been concretized by religion into a brick to throw at your neighbor. Metaphors confused with fact, and truth and science are denied with conspiracy theories. We are surely at the crossroads. Our abduction into the COVID underworld has prompted some to ask these questions. What is really necessary in my life? What are my priorities, and do I need to consider new ones? What do I really need? What is really important in life? Watching the federal government's response to the crisis has many asking, what's going on here? What's our priority, money or people? What comes first, economy, commerce, industry, and capitalism, or the health of our children, our families, our loved ones, and our elderly? As global commerce and industry shut down, we saw the ecological systems of the planet shift. Pollution lifted and wildlife returned to places they had not been in decades. It became very apparent nature will do just fine without us. We are in control of so little. This pandemic has prompted millions to reassess our global future. If the pandemic has shown us that we are all interdependent to survive, what about the looming specter of climate change, world hunger, the increasing demand for energy, endless wars? The abduction of the entire planet, this unwilling descent from the gateway of home and hearth into the underworld, is the hallmark of our heroine's journey, inward and down, into the deepest parts of our psyche. From micro to macro, we are suspended in liminal space, beginning to recreate our relationships with each other and the natural world. This is the work of the conscious feminine. Maureen Murdoch writes that the essential work of the heroine's journey is to embrace our feminine nature and heal the deep wound inflicted throughout history upon women and the archetypal feminine. This primal wound goes back to the ancient origins of patriarchy, its repression of women and the conscious divine feminine archetypal energies in both men and women. Looking at the last 6,000 years or so of humanity's journey and its embrace of patriarchy as a cultural structure, we can see the systematic repression and destruction of the symbols, expressions, representations, and embodiments of the sacred feminine. The heroine's journey invites us to go deep within ourselves and begin a cycle of healing to forge a balanced relationship between the masculine and the feminine archetypal energies in psyche. We have an opportunity to rethink our lives and what kind of a world we want to live in. We have an opportunity to imagine and create a new world built on a foundation of global relationship, compassion, equality, and codependence. From home, the realm of Hestia, the sacred hearth, the center of life, nurturance, and fire, we are invited to reclaim intuition, creativity, compassion, relationship, empathy, eros, and a sustainable relationship with our planet. We are on a collective heroine's journey. Who will answer the call? If we would make the ascent from the underworld with our boon, we must return the way we descended, through the gateway of home. To heal the wound, the conscious feminine must be honored and reestablished in our experience of life. By embracing all of its qualities and the ecological balance of nature, we can survive and build a new world. By answering the call, we begin to heal the wound, and we take our next steps towards the integration and balance of the masculine and the feminine. Only then can we create the hieros gamos, or the sacred marriage, between the masculine and feminine in ourselves, in our culture, and in the world. If we can ascend from the underworld through the shrouding mists and climb over the rocky crags of the Valley of Avernus, if we can stay the course, if we can move forward, and if we don't look back, we may emerge from the underworld hand in hand with our Eurydice, with the first lines of a new myth and a renewed hope for the future. This has been Dr. Andrea Slominski, reading my paper from the Mythologium conference of August 2020. If you'd like to know more about my work, go to drandreaslominski.com.